Yeah, we've adapted Agile to us. It's feedback from the team that has led to all of these changes.
Hi, I'm your host, Magali Pellissier, and I'm a product manager. Welcome to Product Perspectives, the podcast for product people that gives a voice to their stakeholders. Each week, I show you the other side of the product. I interview the people who contribute to making products a success. They are engineers, writers, marketers, support analysts, UX designers, or even salespeople. Not only will I give them the credit they deserve, but will uncover what makes a good product and a good product manager from their perspective. Stakeholders management is a key skill for product managers. So just as you are obsessed with listening to your customers, let's hear from your stakeholders. My guest today is Lauren Macpherson. Lauren leads the commercial effort at two Dutch studios, Eli5, which builds custom digital products, and Noco, which covers no-code design and development. Day to day, she is responsible for planning and executing the business development, sales, and marketing strategies for both companies. She also works on the validation and launch of the in-house products Eli5 creates. Thank you very much, Lauren, for joining me today. I'm very excited to hear about what you do. Tell me more about your role and your company.
I work for Eli5, which is a product studio. So we build custom software for startups all the way up to corporate ventures for FTSE 500 companies. So it really, really varies, but it's all custom coded. I run the commercial parts of Eli5, and so that includes planning and executing the business development, the sales and marketing strategies. I also work on the validation and launch of the in-house products that we create for ourselves. I also work for Noco, which is a subsidiary company that covers no-code solutions, so simple apps, simple websites. That was kind of to cover the inquiries that we would get in to Eli5, but didn't need big custom coding and they didn't need intellectual property, and they just wanted something a little bit faster and a bit cheaper. And then also we are designing a validation company at the moment to help our customers validate their ideas before they start building them. We are also launching a podcast. There's all sorts of different things that I do.
All of the commercial stuff, what does that mean in practice? What are the different activities?
So, I mean, we have to think about ourselves as a business and how people find us. We've tried a lot of different things. We are asking people to commit to building a whole digital product that might take months, sometimes years. That can cost a lot of money. In the end, I think the investment is worth it because you're designing something that is going to help your employees or your customers or your clients. And so having your own proprietary software in-house that's built for you and solving all of your particular problems in the way that you work and integrates with your systems. It's a tough thing to sell because sometimes people don't necessarily know that they have problems. They don't realize that there could be a digital solution. You're approaching people with a huge project and you don't necessarily know what their problems are. Sometimes they just don't necessarily know it. So to market to them and to sell to them is quite difficult. So my job is to try and work out how we do that. And one of the things that we've decided is to take on a sort of flywheel mentality, which means just lots and lots of small wins in terms of marketing and sales that will all connect to each other. And so that's why we have Noco, because that's a smaller price tag. And that could get people to know who we are and more about Eli5, and we can sell via that channel. That will sort of trickle down. Then we also have the validation company that we're coming up with. So if we get 100 people come in and say, we want to validate our ideas, we have an idea for some software, or help us go into this department and make a digital solution for them so that their lives are a bit easier. We've had projects like that before. We go in, if we have the validation company and we can go in and provide those services, 1 in 100 maybe will end up being an Eli5 client. And the same with the sort of brand awareness we're doing. That's why we're looking at podcasts. That's why we're writing blogs. We've got really serious about social media. So we're posting a few times a week. And so day to day, it's engaging with other companies and other people. So it's speaking to people on Twitter, speaking to people on LinkedIn, speaking to people in lots of Slack groups I'm a part of, or women's groups in technology that I'm a part of, and just understanding what's going on out in the world, so we can understand where the problems are and where the clients are.
How many people are here to support you in that task?
We have a really small team by design. I don't have a manager, so I just run a lot of it myself, but I am supported by the founders, the designers, and the developers. So our designer, Yella, helps me with lots of the social media posting and making the website look nice, and helping me with the user journey through the website and the buyer journey through the whole system that we've made. When you're marketing, everybody has to support you, really, because I don't build the products. I understand how it all works, and I can be involved in little bits here and there, but essentially I'm not a developer and I'm not a designer. And so I have to get as much information from them as possible so that I can tell people what we're doing. And that might mean social posting, but also we have stand-up meetings 3 times a week. And we have a demo meeting every Friday, so everyone across the company can see it. So there's a lot of communication, which really helps me make relevant content.
So you've said lots of things about working in sprint, working with developers, designers. So who is acting as the product manager?
So we have 2 founders, Keishan, who is the CTO, and we have Wes, who is the CEO, and he kind of covers everything else. I think in terms of the development, I would say that Keishan is managing all of that, and Wes would be managing the designers a little bit more, but I think it crosses over a lot. Actually, what works in our company is that everyone manages themselves quite a lot. So I manage myself and the decisions that we make for marketing a lot. I'm trusted to kind of carry on with what I'm doing.
Yeah, it sounds that people in your team are self-organizing and you're following the Agile methodology. What I've noticed is you said you're doing stand-ups 3 times a week. Normally in the Agile methodology, by the book, it's daily stand-ups. You're doing demos every Friday, but you're doing sprints every 2 weeks. So you're doing more demos than sprints. So you're basically adapting the Agile methodology to what works for you. How did that come up?
I think a lot of it came from remote working. We used to be all in the office and we'd do a stand-up and it was really easy. We're all in the same room. We stand up for a bit and we tell everyone what we're doing. What we realized with the remote work was, I think it was just grinding everyone down a little bit, and they just became unnecessary. But what we have as well, which I didn't mention, is that on Slack every morning at 7 a.m, Slack bot will say, hey, what did you do yesterday? What are you planning to do today? And do you need any help? And then in the morning, everyone will have answered those questions. And so you can check through and everyone can make sure that they know what everyone else is doing. And if anyone needs any help, they can just get in touch with each other. And so because we have that, you don't necessarily need the stand-ups every single morning. Every other day works really well because it's nice to see everyone. I think if we had fewer stand-ups, I think we'd feel a bit disconnected. If we had more, it just starts to feel like a grind. Yeah, we've adapted Agile to us. It's feedback from the team that has led to all of these changes. The tough part of marketing for me, it has always been the balance between the fact that we have to market the company to have things to work on, but then those jobs mean that everyone is busy on client work. And so they don't necessarily always have time for marketing.
You said that you don't have a direct manager and one of your founders acts as a product manager, basically. So how do you know what's happening with the product? How do you know which new features are coming? How do you get that information to then be able to do your job?
With Wes, one of the founders, and Yella, who's the lead designer, we decide what the next 2 weeks worth of social media marketing will look like. And sometimes they have more insight into the projects than I do. And so they'll say, hey, we should talk about this. Hey, we've recently finished this, or there's a new feature here. The tough part of marketing for me in every company I've worked in has always been the balance between the fact that we have to market the company to get jobs in, to pay everybody, and to have things to work on. But then those jobs mean that everyone is busy on client work. And so they don't necessarily always have time for marketing. I don't want to keep nagging them to tell me stuff or to help me write blogs or to help me create social posts or had to say, hey, could you do a walkthrough demo of what your product is? And sometimes they're like, yeah, of course. They all want to be really, really helpful. But every now and again, you might hit them at a time when they're really busy. And so I feel awkward about it. And have to sort of push through the fact that in an ideal world, I would be able to harass them for information every day without it impacting their work. But unfortunately, it just does.
Good. So this is the second time I hear product, so your founder, marketing, that's you, and design coming together in a room to think about how we're going to market our product, how we're going to position it. We talk a lot about product and marketing working together, but what does your designer bring to the table in those conversations?
I don't think you can be a product studio and make stuff for clients without knowing what they're going through and without having the experience yourself. And so the other side of what we do is we create our own digital products based on our own problems that we found. And we then have to launch those products as well and understand what it means to start from zero and build an audience and create personas. Everybody gets really triggered by the word persona, which frustrates me a lot because it is the most important thing, because it's all about your users. And if you don't understand who your users are, then you're not really going to get anywhere. There is a friend of ours called Jelmer Pibolta, or Jelmer Pay, as he goes by on social media, and he has written some really interesting stuff about getting to know your customers better. And I like to sort of follow what he says. And a lot of that is about understanding their, people say pains, but it's critical pains. So his example is, the example that he used was, if a light bulb in your house stops working, you might not replace it immediately. It's not an urgent sort of pain that you want to fix straight away. If your Wi-Fi cuts out, you'll be on the phone immediately because you need your internet. And so it's the urgency of problems and the urgency of the pains, and whether or not people are willing to pay for that stuff. You're willing to pay for an electrician or a plumber because you don't want to touch the wiring and the pipes in your house, but you might not be willing to pay for someone to come and change your light bulb or fix your Wi-Fi because you can maybe do that yourself on the phone. So there's all of these different levels of what the customer is experiencing and the potential users experiencing, and trying to plan for that when you're designing the product and also when you're trying to launch it. And so I think a big part of that is understanding how they'll then interact with the product. And I think that's where the UX really comes in, and the designers are really helpful. So it's really helpful for me to have designers come in and say, hey, well, when people get to the website, this is the information that they're looking for. And we also use lots of marketing tools. So we use something like Hotjar, which can tell us the way that people interact with the screen. So we can see, oh, they touch this button all the time, or they hover around this. Like sometimes they'll hover around a picture expecting to be able to click on it. And you realize, oh, that needs to be clickable. Or we realize that quite often only 25% of people get to the bottom of the page. So we've got to make sure all the information's up top. And sometimes you'll see that they navigate to some information really quickly. So you can tag everything up in Google Tag Manager and see what the behavior through the website is, and realize actually people really want to know more about our work. Maybe we should have that on the homepage. And so I think what I can bring is lots of data, but then I need a little bit of help translating that sometimes into something that the user wants to see. The tough part of marketing for me has always been the balance between the fact that we have to market the company to have things to work on, but then those jobs mean that everyone is busy on client work, and so they don't necessarily always have time for marketing.
So are you the one responsible for bringing the data and analyzing it and finding the pain points? And then you bring that to your designer to say, okay, we've got a problem here. How do we solve it? How does that process work?
Yeah, so it's pretty much what you say. We do it a lot with our content as well. So we say, oh, well, lots of people read this. So I remember when I first started at Eli5, I had a list of 10 different things we were going to write blogs about, and we'll see how they went. And I think after week 4, we really hit on a good group, which was smart cities. People were really interested in smart cities. And so it's the same with products, which is you look at how people are interacting with it, you get as much feedback as possible. The data really helps us to change the direction of the product. It is a lot about qualitative feedback as well. So it's speaking directly to people. I think I would always prioritize talking to people. At the same time, people are very polite and they don't want to insult your product. So you need the data side to look at the real behavior and see what people actually do, because they might say, oh yeah, your product's great, and then you see that they don't log on for a week.
You've already answered my question that I was about to say, qualitative or quantitative?
I tend to lean towards quantitative research because that's what I get. I'm the one looking at the website stats and looking at the social media stats, and I'm dealing with a lot of people and I don't know who they are. And so I have to rely on it, and I have to try and find patterns in that. I think on the other side, if you were one of the developers or one of the designers, you might say qualitative. It's because they're talking to the user. I think they find that a lot more helpful.
That's actually very interesting that you're saying your developers like to hear the feedback directly from customers and users. You also said initially that people don't always know which problems they're having, and certainly they don't know which solutions are out there that could help them solve these problems. So how do you approach user research?
So we are involved to a certain extent. We do it for ourselves. So for our own products, we would all get together and decide what the best idea is and work deep down into that pain and that problem and think about the user. And so the example I was using was this RegTech. And so we go in and we had a product owner who was part of an innovation company. And so he was owning the product. We were then helping to design and develop it. And so we went in with the initial problems that they were having, and between us worked out what the best solution would be and create an MVP for that, and then take it in, and then we get feedback. And over time, we've gotten to know the team really, really well. So they have, the client side owns the product. And so we get a lot of information from him. We get to speak directly to the team and we get lots of feedback. And so that's when we're doing our design sprints and our development sprints.
We've got somebody whom you know asking you a question. So this is Jorit Kaiser, who is the founder of Paper app, and he's asking this question.
How does marketing a product studio like Eli5 differ from a no-code studio like Noco, and the products we build and launch ourselves?
Having a company like Eli5 who has a big ticket price on it, it's a long project that will cost a certain amount, because it's long, will cost a certain amount of money, and trying to find someone who is ready to build the type of product we build is very tough. So we don't really like to do core business solutions because you're going into someone else's IT infrastructure. They're old, they're difficult to work within, and they're really restrictive. I mean, luckily, we're in a place where our company is quite successful, so we can be a bit picky about our products and what projects we want to take on. And so we are picky about what we work on. We like to build startups and corporate ventures. And so to hit a corporate, for example, at the time when they are ready to build something is really difficult. We have a lot of projects sort of on standby waiting for budget because they have budget cycles, and we have a lot of projects on standby because we need more stakeholder engagement, which is why we sort of started the validation company. And so Eli5 marketing and business development really relies on all of the other stuff. So it relies on Noco. So Noco marketing is a bit easier because you're trying to find people who want to build an app or a website. That's a huge audience compared to people who want to build a corporate startup or a startup. And it's a lower ticket price, and it's a smaller project. And so for a corporate to commit to improving their website or building a website for one of their startups is a much easier thing for them to sign that off. It's a 10K project, much easier. Then when we are launching a product, we might be saying subscribe for $5 a month or something. That's a much easier thing to sell than 10K for a website, but it requires volume. So it's a different type of marketing for each. You're trying to sell something that is a lower value, but you're trying to convince someone that paying a few dollars a month for something is worth it. And you're trying to not only sell it to that one person, but a few thousand others in order to make enough to maintain that and keep developing it and improving it and updating it. With Eli5, one thing we realized is speaking to corporates that they need a bit of preliminary work done. So they need stuff like idea validation or budgeting or project roadmaps or technical feasibility checks on their IT infrastructure. And so with our validation service, we're trying to package up those things into products. So we say, hey, you need these 5 things. Cool, that will cost this much. And we're offering it at pretty much almost cost price, not for profit. So we can undercut some of our competitors and get those projects greenlit so we can bring them into Eli5. So it's not even marketing, it's just helping those companies get stuff over the line. With Noco, it's very visual. We're a design focused no code development and design company. When people want websites, the most important thing to them is that they look good and they do the things that they want. Then when it comes to the products, it's about your users sort of banging your drum for you. It's about a community. So I think the bit of Web3 that I really agree with is the community building. So building a community around your product, which is what we do. We build a beta testing community. It's providing really, really good product that really helps them, that then they share it and share it and share it.
Good. So in this podcast, there's also a little game where you have to pick one option. You have 3 options: Eli5, Noco, or this new validation company.
I would say Eli5 because that's the mothership. It's where I started out. Like I said, I was an intern and I've learned everything I've learned from them. It's also got the whole team in it.
Great. You're in charge of the social media for the company, so Twitter or LinkedIn?
Oh, Twitter. Oh, just LinkedIn. You know what it is? It's the cringe posts on LinkedIn. I hate them. I do, however, follow some really amazing people that work in product on LinkedIn who, luckily, the algorithm now, I see their posts first. Twitter, I do really love being a part of. It's so fast. So sometimes I get a bit frustrated because to use Twitter properly, you need to be on it all the time. I do think Twitter has a lot more of the people I like to follow on it.
Yeah, so, yeah. I left LinkedIn recently, so I'm not going to argue it's a good platform. Next option, code or no code?
So I do love no code and I love the community, but I would always choose code. You have just so much more with code. No code is really good because it democratizes technology and it lets everybody in. So it's a really good opportunity for someone with an idea to bring it to life. And it's a really great community. Everyone is super helpful. They're always posting tutorials. But I think the level of creativity that you get with custom coding is just beautiful. And it's more complex, it's more interesting. It just looks so simple on the surface, but there can be so much going on underneath it. And just in terms of business-wise, it's not a sort of grey box, which is what no code is. You aren't fully in control of your data. You're not fully in control of how that software is going to grow and develop, what features they're going to have. So you just have less control over it.
Wow, this is a surprise. I would have bet you would have picked no code.
Because I could actually do no code myself. But I can't code, but I would choose code.
Right. And next one, which is the last one, blog or podcast?
I am a big fan of podcasts. We're creating our own podcast as well. So I've been doing a lot of research because I've been building a podcast on personas and stuff. And, the average podcast user or podcast listener, they listen to sort of 7 a week or something insane. I have sort of 4 or 5 that I subscribe to that I listen to regularly. And they all kind of cater for different things. So if I listen to one about politics, just to keep up to date with what's going on, sometimes that's a bit heavy. So I'll listen to one that's a bit more fun. Sometimes I'll listen to sort of business ones about entrepreneurship, and you get some amazing interviews with really interesting people. Although I do love to read a blog, I do like to read a book. And I think books are great for taking me away from everything, which I don't think a podcast can do because I'm always doing something else. So if I want to escape, I would read a book.
Thank you very much. So this discussion has been very interesting. And I'd like to know if you have a final piece of advice for product managers or founders of startup about how to work better with people like you. What would you tell them?
The thing about marketing is I think you always have an idea of what you want your product and your company to be and come across like. And you want it to have its own identity. But I think you have to have a lot coming inward as well. I think that's a lot of outward pushing, which is we want our company to be this is our brand, this is what we're going for, this is how we look. But I think a lot of people are quite resistant to hearing what your audience, your users want, and adapting to that. You have to have a good balance between what you want to do and what you kind of need to do. So I think we've worked with some clients in the past who have been very specific about what they want and how they want to come across, and ignore the feedback that they're sort of getting from users. You know, they don't want to use social media, but that's how people communicate. So yeah, you have to adapt a little bit to your users, I think, even in marketing, not just in the product.
Thank you. If listeners want to contact you, what should they do?
Everyone seems to find my email anyway. So I'm Lauren at Eli5.io. I use Twitter mostly. It's probably the easiest way to see what I'm saying, and that is at Lauren Types.
Thank you very much for your time. I've really loved talking about how agile your company is and how you're really focused on the user and solving their problems. But it was very refreshing to hear this. Thank you. And I look forward to listening to your podcast. Thank you everyone for taking the time to listen to this podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode and that it has enabled you to understand your stakeholder and inspired you to better work with them to make successful products. If so, please share the link with your friends and colleagues. And if you want to suggest some topics, some guests, if you have questions you'd like me to ask during the interviews, or if you have any feedback, you can write to me at magalipellissier@hotmail.fr.